I'm Paul Dergarabedian, Senior Media Analyst for Comscore, and I'm here with Thaddeus Bouchard of ScreenDollars and Mike Polydoros of Paper Airplane Media. And we're in a supersized edition of Ticket to Ride, Season 2, Episode 9, Part 2.
Yes, 9.
And so we're giving you we're continuing our CinemaCon wrap up. But before we get to that, I want to ask particularly Mike Polydoros, what did you hear? What were the takeaways that you heard during and coming out of CinemaCon, which was just last week?
Interesting you should say that, Paul. Going into CinemaCon, wasn't really sure what the key, we knew that the performance of the box office was going to be a topic, but the real kind of industry issues that at some point will need to be addressed, it feels like there were three things. Number one were, I think everybody's read about it, it's the windows. And exhibition is really looking for a 5-day window. The studios kind of like it the way it is. There's a big debate over, what those windows actually mean to the box office. And it really, I talked to a lot of different people from all sides of the aisle, so to speak, last week. And it really depends on who you're talking to, on what the viewpoint is on that.
Would you say, Mike, that's the hot topic or hot button issue?
That is the hottest topic right now. And I think, though, the good news is, unlike where we were, 6-7 years ago, where there were lines being drawn in the sand regarding the windows, I think this is more of a discussion at this point. Right. And I think that there is optionality that will be, one prominent exhibitor I talked to said, we just have to be in a place where we're not conditioning the consumer to expect it to be available to him in a couple of weeks somewhere.
Right.
And I thought that was a very astute way of looking at it. So they weren't totally against every now and then a window, being a little more aggressive or whatever it was, but they did not want it to be like, it's going to go this, and this, because that's going to train the consumer. Like, you have to, if you keep them guessing, and you want to see a movie, you're going to go,
that's a really good point. Because if, let's say, happy hour is every 5 p.m. at a certain restaurant, you're going to come to expect that. So then if suddenly, the windows are X, Y, and Z, then like you just said, that paraphrasing what somebody said about if the consumer starts thinking, well, if I wait a couple of weeks or, 3 weeks, I can just watch this movie at home. But we have obviously seen examples where audiences knew the movie was available at home and still went to the theater.
Well, the argument on the other side of that is, that's right. So the portion of the audience that is coming to the theater doesn't really care that it's going to be on transactional at home. Yeah. What they're saying is there's a portion of the audience that would come to the theater, but is not. You never even see them because they're like, I'm just waiting the 2 weeks until it's or 3 weeks until it's. So I don't know if there's any data really to back all of it up, but that is kind of the argument. Now, conversely, the studio argument, because everybody's going to wonder, like, well, what's the studio argument? The studio argument is very simple, and that is we are spending millions and millions of dollars to market these movies. A lot of times now, and we can go into all the reasons, but, movies don't necessarily have the long tail they used to have as far as how they play out. And a lot of that has to go with the old and with the new and that kind of thing. So the studio's saying, after 3 weeks, Mr. Exhibitor is basically saying, I'm off screen in 90% of my locations. And now I've got to wait another 30 days before I can actually start monetizing it again after I've spent all this awareness in marketing, So it would be better if I can just kind of dovetail off of that. I'm going to be able to do better on my margins, which ultimately means I'm going to bring more movies to the movie theater. And it's not going, and to your point, Paul, it doesn't affect the box office because we see it actually gets a lift. So those are the two kind of competing arguments.
That on the studio side and on the theatrical side or the exhibitor side is very well said. I think, too, the whole idea of having the percentage of box office earned within the first 2 or 3 weeks of a movie's debut is pretty significant, that you could argue, and I'm not arguing this, but if you just look at the data, a lot of movies do make the lion's share of their box office in that first 2 weeks. But the point is that they need to remain theatrical. That builds, in my opinion, that prestige factor, the want to see factor, and all that.
I think so. Here's the key thing, and this goes back to, we've talked about this before, and that is, if there was any silver lighting that came out of the pandemic, and there were very few silver linings, the one would have been that both the studios and the exhibitors were in a position to try every distribution pattern they could think of. We're going day and date. We're actually going to go streaming 7 days before we're going to go into release. Yeah. We're going to go 30. We're going to go. So
yeah, it was like a test kitchen. We had that ability to do that. In that, it's an experiment that was enabled via the pandemic.
And we came back to something that, my gosh, who would have thought? If you go exclusive theatrically for any type of window, you elevate the IP and do exactly what you said, Paul, and that is you create a want to see, in the waterfall. Right. Whether that's PVOD, whether that's SVOD, whether it's AVOD, whether it's Avon, it doesn't matter.
Avon.
I'm just saying, Avon calling.
What do you think of Snow White then? I mean, Snow White famously underperformed. It had so many issues swirling around it. We don't have to go into all those. But I argue, and I've seen this, that a lot of movies that did not do well for whatever reason on the big screen are often bigger on streaming because of the people have heard about them and all that.
That's going to be something for Disney to have to sift through when they get done with it. And I don't think it's gone to streaming or to PVOD yet. If it did, it just got there. But I guess the point to the story is the studios are getting squeezed just as much as the exhibitors are now. And I know it's hard for everybody to believe, but just look at what's happening with some of these bigger companies. You mentioned Disney. They're going to take it on the chin pretty well. If the numbers are right on Snow White, that one's not going to pencil out the way that they probably would like. So the margins for the studios are tough. The margins for the exhibitors are tough. And they all, while they're playing in the same sandbox, they have kind of different financial models of how it all works. And I think what it comes down to is we just need to come up with a way that works for everybody. I think we're close. I think we're a lot closer today than we were 6-7 years ago when it was, you got to be 90 days and it's, we're going to go to war if you're not. I don't feel that. I feel it's a conversation, and I feel there's some creativity that's going to have to happen to make that. But it's important enough that it was probably the number one topic that came up this week. The number two topic that came up this week is something that I've been hearing rumblings from for the last probably year and a half as talking to people, and that is pricing. And that is that the value proposition of going out to the movies needs to be what it always has been, Paul, and that is the best value proposition in the entertainment space. And I think a lot of individuals are starting to feel that's not necessarily the case. That when you start adding up how much I'm spending on a ticket, and especially if you're going to a premium format, what I'm spending on concessions, what I have to spend on the babysitter, what I have to spend on, parking and everything like that, whatever it is, you add it up. And in the old days, and, we were just talking before we hit the record button, guys. This is the old group here. But in the old days when we were going to the movies, you could take a flyer. It didn't cost that much, and you could go and see a movie. And if it wasn't great, it was like, but it was a fun night out. But now, if it's a couple $100 for you to go to the movies and take the family, that's a significant investment.
And taking the family to Hawaii,
it is cheaper than taking the family to a sporting event. But
that's true.
That's
right. Or a concert.
But if you're going to compare us to going to a concert or a sporting event, which are maybe once a month, or once a quarter, or twice a year, then we're going to lose. Because we need to be, it's Friday night, I can go to the movies, it's not going to break the bank, and I'm going to maybe see something that wasn't an appointment movie, and I'm going to enjoy it. We need to get back to that.
I know that Film Frog, Brandon Jones was mentioning, or was it him? I forget who it was, but somebody said, we have Bargain Tuesday, why not have Bargain Wednesday?
That was Chris. Chris brought that up. Aronson brought that up.
Chris Aronson.
Yeah, Chris brought that up in the Paramount thing.
That's right.
He's not wrong. And, you look at it and, the way we price movies, again, it's like everything we do, we're based, and, some people are going to get mad at me for this one, but it's true. A lot of our business practices are all based on a 35 millimeter business, an analog business. We're in the digital world, and we should be doing things that other industries do. And the pricing model is, it doesn't matter if it's Minecraft or if it's, Joe Blow went to the movies, the price is the same for that ticket.
Right.
And is that the smartest way for us to be doing business? And again, the issue always becomes, well, a human can't sit there and say, I'm going to say this movie's worth this and this movie's worth that. And I'm not suggesting that. But, with technology today, when we go to a sporting event, when we go to the movie, when we fly on an airline, when we go to a hotel, all those prices are determined based on market availability and what has happened. It's all supply and demand, but it's real-time supply and demand.
Yeah, it's digital. So that's your analog versus digital. These things can't all be calculated. Yeah.
And the argument for the longest time has always been that Paul is not going to be happy if he knows he spent $12 for a ticket and Thaddeus spent $11.
It happens on every time I fly on an airplane. You could be spending $400 for your seat, and the person next to you paid $100 or more. You never know.
And it doesn't matter, what it comes down to. It just doesn't matter anymore. So I think that argument really needs to be taken into consideration, and we need to figure out a way to make, when Minecraft is opening, the value proposition on that is a lot higher than the value proposition is on, I'm not picking on the movie, I'm just saying because the way it performed, Novocaine. So if you look at how Novocaine did, Novocaine would have benefited probably from having a more aggressive price.
Or Black Bag.
Or Black Bag. Mm-hmm. Either one of those would have probably had more people come see it and would have had a higher gross. Meanwhile, you probably could have got a higher gross by a little bit out of Minecraft because the demand was a little higher there.
Well, I just came up with the solution, guys. It's how many dollars per minute of screen time.
Well,
so the brutalist would be really expensive, right?
There are.
You get your money's worth.
No easy solutions on any of this.
Hey, so Mike, what's another? And so we talked about the windows pricing. If you have any more on pricing, go ahead.
The last thing that really came up, and this one is again going to be a much tougher one to come up with, and that is the general marketing of movies and how movies are marketed today versus how traditionally movies have been marketed. And Paul, you and I have talked about this for years, going back to pre-pandemic, about in the olden days when I had hair, linear TV was the majority of what it would be. You would have 65-70% would go to the TV campaign. And because people were watching TV, network TV, even cable TV on a regular basis, it was, I'm not going to say easy, but you knew where these people were and you could get ads to them. Now, everybody's watching their streaming shows. The only thing people are really watching live these days are sporting events. So if you can't reach them via a sporting event, it's digital media, it's connected TV, it's YouTube, it's those ways that the studios are having to resort to, and it's much less, not effective, but it's harder to make that initial pop. Because if you're sitting there on YouTube, I think everybody is very familiar with skip the ad after 4 seconds. Unless there's something that grabs you in that 4 seconds, you're skipping the ad. It really goes to show you, because then I guess when you look at it, you take a step back and you look at, IP, original IP versus what I would call established IP. The established IP tends to be able to break through a little bit better.
It sure does, Mike. I mean, look at Novocaine, Last Breath, Black Bag, all well reviewed.
Yep.
The Looney Tunes movie did quite well, but Looney Tunes is a brand. So
that's the thing is, if you have a brand, you're ahead of the game. And
like Minecraft.
Minecraft absolutely had a brand. And I think as taking a step back, as an industry, we're going to have to figure this one out. And that is, it's not just spend more money. It's how do we efficiently spend to identify
Mike,
the audience.
Do you mean when you talk about marketing, and I want to ask Thaddeus this too, because you work with exhibitors all the time. So there's the studio marketing, right? They have that marketing budget, but then there's the in-theater marketing. And let's talk about that, what theater managers and their staff can do to go beyond the studio marketing and get it in the theater.
I think there's a couple different sort of things, to me anyways, that come to mind here. One is that, coming back to what you said, Mike, is that, if you're on YouTube and you've got the sort of, skip after 5-second ad experience that you're having, you're not putting a 30-second spot on someone's linear television, right, in front of them so that they follow from beginning to end. You've got 3 seconds to get your message across. And if it's existing IP, it's like, oh yeah, Looney Tunes, I know what that is. There's a movie coming out. Got it. Whereas if it's Novocaine, it's like, I don't know what that is, skip. So I think you have to talk in a different way. You not only have to reach the audience online where they live, but you have to talk to them in a very, very different way than the studios, or coming back to what you were asking about, Paul, the exhibitors are used to. Yeah. I think the studios have pretty sophisticated marketing departments that have built up over the decades. So they have a sense for how to communicate, although there's a lot of learning going on the studio side too. And I'm sure you guys are hearing that all the time. But from exhibitors' point of view, exhibitors, if that's like a whole podcast, is how exhibitors do their marketing to their community, to their customers and potential customers. The exhibitors that are used to just opening the doors and letting people come in for the latest movie are really struggling, because that's not much marketing, even old school marketing, let alone new school marketing. Right. So now they have to identify, how to reach out to and communicate with folks. And then they have to talk to them in the right way. Well, so they have two challenges.
That is, what you're saying is, that's the whole basis of Paper Airplane. That's what we do. We work with...
Talk about that.
Well, we work with the studios, the exhibitors, what I would call the third-party content partners, and we work to best utilize all of the exhibitor channels to reach moviegoers, using their moviegoer data, retargeting people who have seen similar movies, being able to send a message to someone who wants to receive the message. To me, Thaddeus, that goes back to what you were talking about on the YouTube skip. If we can get a message to someone who wants to receive the message, 2/3 of the battle is done.
So how do you do that on a movie like Mickey 17, Black Bag, Last Breath, Novocaine? So, not to put anyone on the spot, but
no. They're great questions. You need to go and figure out, okay, Mr. Exhibitor has, eons of movie data on what people are coming to. They know, if you're a member of any of these loyalty clubs, or if you've used the credit card, they've got a pretty good idea what you're buying tickets for. Right. So the idea would be, let's take Last Breath. Okay, what movies are we going to comp that to? What movies that have come out, and you really have to use a subset that's within the last 3 or 4 years. You can't go much
underwater diving movies.
But it's Woody Harrelson. It's this. So you create a comp list of reasons that somebody would want to come to that movie. You then dissect that and you figure out what exhibitors are good at certain things. Who's good at a push notification? Who's good at an email? There's a secret sauce to how all of this stuff works. And then what you've got to do is you then reach out with the right messaging to those people, and the idea to engage and to be able to get them, to do a call to action and to actually purchase a ticket. None of it is easy. That's what it comes to. And none of it...
product every week. Right? So it's not
but you've got to be planning ahead. It's new product every week. And to what Thaddeus says is it's out of the norm. The norm used to be studio's got to do all the heavy lifting. I'll do a little bit, but for the most part, the studio's going to do it. And that model is not going to work anymore. And exhibition realizes it, and they know they have all this data. I think they're still figuring out exactly how they want to use it and how I can slice and dice it. And you can't over send information to somebody. You can't sit there and send Paul a email blast, 5 times a day, because you're just going to be immune to it after a while. It really has to be sending, Paul a message that he wants to receive. I can't emphasize that enough.
And then how do we engage consumers to talk to their friends and family more? Because the Becoming Led Zeppelin documentary, for example, Mike, you turned me on to that. I didn't even know it was coming out, and we were on the podcast. You're like, Paul, I'm not really a Zeppelin fan, but I saw this trailer. I go, what? Like, to
You would
me,
think social media should be the answer to that question, right?
Yeah.
'Cause
Well,
that's how people
social-
share information, right?
And again, you're both right. We don't do a very good job as an industry of tapping into that word of mouth that we could. And I think again that is getting outside our comfort zone, creating ways that people can share and people can talk about. I was at this movie. I saw this. This was great.
or I've heard about this movie and I think we'll dig it.
But it's important that the content providers and the exhibitors are able to provide this, these nuggets that their moviegoers could use. That to me is, that is a important kind of way of doing, looking forward. But again, I'm going to say what I said at the top, and that is none of this is easy. There are no easy solutions to any of this.
Transfer of word of mouth that used to go through the reviews, right? The film reviewers. I mean, that's how you learned about a film.
Well,
back,
but
20
so
years ago,
now
right?
you have those things. You still have them, and you have Letterboxd, you have Rotten Tomatoes, you have ways that the quality of a movie is being shared for better and for worse. Because I think the other thing that happens too now, Paul, is that if a movie isn't that great, word gets out pretty quick.
Right.
Well, and conversely, if a movie doesn't do well, that's that box office wise, that is then conflated by many people with the quality of the movie. And I always say, Mickey D's sells the most hamburgers. Are they the best hamburgers? Well, that's up to interpretation. So, I mean, just because a movie doesn't do well in terms of the box office, but again, that happens though. People go, oh, that movie must be no good. No, it probably wasn't properly marketed, or the word of mouth didn't get out in the way, or the title of the,
I'm not going to blame
the movie.
I'm not going to blame properly marketed, because I think that's a cop out in a lot of ways. Because I think marketing a movie is very, very difficult. I think if anyone's going through wash and repeat marketing, that's a problem.
Right.
Because I do believe that the days of, I'm just going to do this, I'm going to do this, and it's all going to work.
You can't put it on autopilot, right?
No, I think every movie needs to be treated.
What about release dates too? I mean, that's really important as well.
Well, the release dates, we've done podcasts on that before, where we've talked about the strategy that goes into the giant puzzle that is the release calendar, and that can make or break movies just as much as all the other pieces. But it all kind of comes together, and it is, I'm going to segue us back to kind of the CinemaCon of it.
Good. I was just about to go
there.
there.
It is, looking at all the product we saw last week. To me, it's an exciting time to be, in
Mike,
the
Mike
industry.
And Thaddeus, when I was seeing and in the theater seeing those, it makes a huge difference. But we talk about TV spots and all that, but oh my God, like that Running Man footage on that big screen and the Jurassic World. And we'll get more into that because we're going to segue into this, because this is part 2 of our supersize. And boy, we're already at 30 minutes. We're just getting to the CinemaCon continuation of our recap. I forget where we left off, but I think we're starting with Angel, perhaps. But what were we up to?
Right, Angel is next up. I didn't see the whole presentation. The one movie that I feel really stood out for me, well, there's 2 movies in the Angel. Angel's got one opening this week, King of Kings, it's going to be their best performing film since Sound of Freedom. And then the other piece is going to be, or the other movie that I'm looking forward to is Sketch. And Sketch is a throwback to like a Goonies, Gremlins type of movie. It'll be interesting to see how that one plays out later this summer.
And they had for Angel, this is huge to be at CinemaCon. And
well, they were there last year.
Yeah, but that's great.
It was great. They were not in the Coliseum. They actually did a breakfast presentation in the ballroom. It's, all of my, as I talk with all of our friends in exhibition, it's all about content. We all talk about it. They can't rely on, the top 6 providers. They need everybody to be pitching.
That's
in.
right.
And to have a company like Angel or to have a company like Amazon step up is really important.
It's great. What's next? What was the next studio?
The next one is Paramount, I think, is what we missed.
Was Universal? Did we talk about Universal yet?
Oh no, we did not. You know what? You're right. So. We did not talk about Universal. Let's okay.
And Disney. That's our
Disney
list.
Disney wrapped
it up. We have
up.
Universal, Paramount, and Disney.
So Universal did something that...
Mike, can I jump in?
Yeah.
So walking into the Coliseum and seeing a 70-piece orchestra I don't know if the orchestra, just the chairs were out there. I'm like, whoa, something big's going to happen. The musicians came out, and these were the musicians from Universal that play the themes for all these, great films. Mike, I didn't articulate that very well. You take over. But really, to have a live, full orchestra on stage for the Universal presentation was just amazing.
It was
like the Oscars. It's like the Oscars, right?
Yeah.
It was better than the Oscars. So it was a 42-piece orchestra led by Ricky Minor. And the best thing I can compare it to for anyone who has ever gone to the Hollywood Bowl over the summer and saw John Williams' The Hollywood Bowl, it was similar to that. So they opened up with about a 5-6 minute montage of identifiable Universal themes.
Jaws, Back to the Future, Jurassic, Psycho,
E.T., and the orchestra playing the theme music while clips from the movie played above. It was, there were many people who said, they did not have a dry eye when that was.
It was amazing, happening. Mike. Has any studio ever done that?
Never. I've never remember. Well, let's take a step back. I want to say the level of the productions this year or the presentations was incredible. I mean, I don't think I've ever been to a CinemaCon where a full concert like The Weeknd broke out with the... at Lionsgate, or where we had a full orchestra that came in, or we'll get to Paramount, but where Tom Cruise was took the stage and basically held it very eloquently for almost 30 minutes as he impassionedly spoke about the theatrical experience and about what McHugh has meant. But going back to Universal, thought it was again a really the orchestra was fantastic. Yeah. I thought their lineup was, again, really good.
Jurassic looks kick-ass, man.
Well, doesn't it look like they're kind of, after kind of being tongue-in-cheek for a while, they basically are making this a little darker, this one, which is...
Scarlett Johansson came to play, man. She just looks like... I mean, she kind of looked Laura Croft-ish in the movie, but I think it almost feels like a reboot in a way, because it just felt very different. Like
it very much did, but
yeah, me too. And Focus Features had some cool movies on display. I mean, I love the combination of and this has been like a Universal, like a mainstay strategy from Universal, and all the studios do this to an extent, of course.
Well, and I thought they did a really good job too of showing the diversity of their slate, including, the announcement on the new Shrek movie, and then talking about Gabby's Dollhouse that is coming up as well. So it looks like they've got a lot coming up.
And the Blumhouse stuff. Some of it was a little out there, I will say. What was that movie called? Soulmate?
A Soulmate, yes. That is out of the Megan universe.
Yeah, it's like an R-rated Megan or something.
That was...
right. That was a Megan 2.0 and then Black Phone 2. Those movies look awesome. So, I mean, going back to Universal's roots of horror, they were the horror studio back in the day, while Warner Brothers was the gangster studio. MGM was the musical studio. And that identity remains mostly through Blumhouse with Universal. But what a great...
hey, we got to go back. Hold on. Editing. I got the wrong movie in there. Gabby's Dollhouse is Nickelodeon. I think that's a Paramount one. That's not a... so please take that out.
Okay.
Not a movie. It sounds weird.
Well, and so now for the editor, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then picking it up, Paul, wrapping up with Wicked. Wicked for good. I mean, right now, that's probably my pick for highest grossing film of the calendar year.
That trailer or the footage, I guess it was a trailer because they had the release date at the end of it. That trailer on that big screen with that sound, that's when people are in theaters. I don't know when they're going to start running that trailer, but holy crap, man, that was amazing. That was a great trailer, and I agree with you, Mike. That movie is going to blow the doors off. So, Universal, great job, great presentation. Jim Moore, shout out to Jim and their entire team.
Then
Benell,
Paramount,
everybody over there, yeah.
So our friends at Paramount kicked off Thursday morning.
Okay, can I play Chris Aronson for a second?
Yes, please do.
Comes out, he goes, okay, everybody, and he does this, and he goes, this year, we're going to play it straight. And everyone's like, you could hear the whole place from like, yeah, right. And then, Mike, what happened?
Well, I want to set that up real quick. So Chris, who's a great guy, he has a reputation of being a showman. Going back to his Fox days when he came out for The Greatest Showman and did a big dance number. You know, Chris does not disappoint when it comes to his entrance at CinemaCon. So for Chris to say we're playing it straight, and then all of a sudden it was the Mission Impossible stunt team that came out and
electric bikes that sounded like motorcycles. They had the sound
and
effect.
Chris even took off on one. And
Chris put on a helmet.
Yeah, and there was a whole stunt show that
they were doing. The one guy did a backflip. There were ramps.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been. I would have been nervous if I was in the front row.
You know, I would have been nervous. Think about the pressure on those stunt performers to do that on a stage, which is a pretty tight.
Well, by the way, so I've been on that stage numerous times, working some of these presentations. And the other thing you don't realize is you don't have the full stage because you have a screen that comes up. So you've really got almost a third. You've only have about a third of the actual space to work with. It is, it's tight up there. And for them to do what they were doing, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, there were like, how many of them, Mike? 7 or 8 of these guys on And they rode through the audience too. I mean, not through the audience, but through the aisles next to the audience. And
I'm sure the insurance writer on that was fantastic.
Chris Aronson, you guys played it straight.
I think they got the Cirque du Soleil team over, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Mission Impossible obviously was a big part of this. And Mike, you alluded to this earlier. I was sitting next to someone who said, there's no way Tom Cruise will be here. I'm like, well, you just wait. Sure enough, he was there to give the CinemaCon Director of the Year award to McHugh, Christopher McQuarrie, who famously wrote The Usual Suspects. And
well, here's the funny thing. So they referred to McHugh's first movie that he directed several times. They never said the title of the movie.
Right.
Do you know what the title of the movie was?
No.
It was Way of the Gun. It was an artisan release.
Way of the Gun.
Ryan Philippe and Benicio del Toro were in it.
And I remember this movie,
because I worked on the movie.
Wow.
Way of the Gun. If you haven't seen it, go watch the opening scene. I mean, it is Ryan Phillippe and Benicio. They get in like a rumble with a bunch of people, and this woman in particular. I haven't seen the movie in years.
I haven't seen the movie since.
But remember that scene, Mike?
Link it in the comments. We'll link it in the comments of our podcast.
It is
that movie, Way of the Gun.
But they mentioned that was Tom mentioned that movie. My buddy Tom. I'm going to call him Tom. By the way, so side note, I had heard. I don't know this for a fact, but I had heard the night before Tom Cruise was actually at the bar that used to be Cleopatra's Bar. He was hanging with McHugh, and they were just having a couple of drinks.
Why didn't you tell me, Mike?
With the with all the convention guys just hanging around, and I think everyone was like, my God, that's Tom Cruise.
Oh, man, I wish I had known that.
Yeah.
I met Tom Cruise once. I have a photo of him with my mom, my late mother. We were at one of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie premieres, and Tom, because he supports his directors, man, he was obviously not in the movie, but showed up. And usually stars, I know I'm going on a tangent, but that's why people listen to Ticket to Ride, all these experiences. But Tom Cruise walks in and everybody's like, holy crap, that's Tom Cruise right there. And then what happens at a lot of premieres, and I haven't been to one in years, I used to go all the time, he started walking away, and everyone's like, Tom, come back. And usually a star, once they're heading for the door,
they're done, yeah.
They're done, like fully done. And he had no people with him, no entourage. And he came back, and I used my mom, I hate to say it, as bait to meet Tom Cruise. I'm like, oh, my mom loves you. And he came up, and we took a picture. She talked to him for about 30 seconds, which was amazing. And so my mom, she used to have a picture of she and I in her purse. She took that one out, bloop, and put the one of her and Tom Cruise in there.
I love that.
Tom Cruise.
I love that.
And I have that picture for Tom. When somebody's nice to your mom, I mean, that I'll never forget how gracious he was. And Mike, you talked about this earlier. He went on stage and was so great. What were you going to say, Thaddeus?
I was going to say these star appearances, whether it's filmmakers or actors or both, to CinemaCon, that's one of the reasons why people come to CinemaCon as well.
That's right.
Well,
so
that is true.
Yeah.
So tell us about the Tom Cruise.
So
there.
Tom, he's it's not a secret how passionate he is about the theatrical experience. Yep. And he went on a passionate plea with Exhibition on how important it was, to keep this medium alive and all the different movies. And I thought as he was talking about the wind-up of Mission Impossible as a series, at least up till now, he thanked every director, every key executive who had worked on his movies. Like it was probably one of the most true to the heart.
He held that whole stage and he did a tribute to Val Kilmer and had us all do a moment of silence for about 15, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
You could have heard, only Tom Cruise could get that. Everybody's just like, you could hear
it was quiet. Yeah. Going back to the presentation, and Mission looks fantastic. Obviously,
looks so
it looks great. Final Reckoning. What the movie I walked out, and it's one of the top movies I walked out of the week going, I was so going in, and I am now all in and can't wait. And that is Running Man. The reboot, it's not a remake. I think they went back to the source material and they're going to try to do the movie very close to that. And probably it stars the guy right now who's the closest thing to the next Tom Cruise, and that's Glenn Powell. Right. That guy is great in everything that he's in. And I don't know about you guys, but I walked out of there going, Running Man is on the top of my list.
So Edgar Wright is one of my absolute favorite all-time directors. Baby Driver, of course, Last Night in Soho. This movie looks so good. Running Man, again, on the big screen was so impactful when we were watching the footage, and that one is just... And then Josh Brolin and Glenn Powell, the stars of the movie, did a Q&A on Thursday midday at a lunch. Jacqueline Coley interviewed them, and wow, what a movie, man. This looks so good. So good.
Yeah, so I thought they were that was another one where you walked out of there going that, Paramount's, definitely got the goods on what they've got going. And then that would take us to our final presentation of the week. And that was our good friends at Disney coming out. And anyone who had any doubts that the live action adaptation of Lilo and Stitch was going to be a home run, those fears were put away. By the way, I don't think anybody had those fears, but that footage looked
Can I mention
amazing.
one thing before I forget? Going back to Running Man, Coleman Domingo as like the game show host.
Oh, yeah, that was great.
He was so good, and he was part of the Q&A with Josh Brolin and Glenn Powell. But sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure to mention.
Oh, yeah. No, and the Lilo and Stitch footage looked fantastic. So.
Yeah. Now, for Disney, absolutely, I'm a mid-century modern fan. That retro futuristic thing going on, Fantastic Four looks fantastic.
It looks like they finally got that one right, doesn't it?
It's like the Jetsons meets I don't know, Frank Lloyd Wright or something, or the mid-century. It's just so cool. That one looked good. And of course, Thunderbolts. What's the asterisk for on the Thunderbolts? I should know this, right?
That is funny. That has been the topic of the week.
So you don't know either?
No. I had a few people come to me and say they have theories. I'm not going to put them out there of what it is. But it is
great marketing, right?
It is great marketing, but it is something that is supposedly will be answered in the movie.
I'm glad I asked that because I want to cover up when I don't know something, don't sound stupid when I ask an obvious question. But I'm glad we have rumors, but we don't know the actual answer to it. That looked great as well. The cast came out on stage. I mean, there was a lot of star power at Disney.
So my favorite movie, and this will surprise no one, but who knows me. It's my favorite movie of the week. I have no idea how it's going to do from a box office standpoint. Is Deliver Me from Nowhere, and that is the Springsteen bio. And unlike the Dylan bio, which basically was about his beginnings, this is about the period in Springsteen's life where he was going from being, a strong rock and roll performer to being a megastar and coming to terms with his own ego and everything like that. And Bruce has been very vocal recently about his struggles with mental health. And this really focuses on the struggles he went through this period. And for anyone who's a Springsteen fan like myself, this basically covers the period after Nebraska. During Nebraska, after Born in the U.S. or leading into Born in the USA. So it's after The River, leading into Born in the USA. Right. It's when he did this very personal acoustic album, Nebraska, which is fantastic for anybody.
And in the trailer, they showed how he recorded that, like in a hotel room with a four.
He recorded it on a 4-track at his home.
Oh, at his home,
just
yeah,
in a room, and with the idea it was all going to become the next big studio album. And these were just the tracks to play them for the band. The band was then going to add in the full, and they actually did record them as full band. Bruce decided it didn't convey what he was feeling. He went back to, he couldn't get the sound that he got when they recorded in the bedroom. So they ended up, that's what got released on Nebraska.
Last night I listened to State Trooper and listened to the whole album. It's incredible. Jeremy Allen White plays the boss.
Yep.
Stephen Graham plays his dad, right? Douglas Dutch Springsteen. David Krumholtz is Al Teller. And notably, Jeremy Strong is John Landau. Let's talk about John Landau. I mean, famously Bruce's producer and friend.
Yeah, and Landau, in Springsteen lore, had been a writer for Rolling Stone. And he had seen Bruce early on, and he had the famous quote, "I have seen the future of rock and roll." And he and Springsteen actually became very close. And to this day, Landau is his partner in all decisions that get done in Springsteen.
I think the casting in a biopic is so key.
Look, I mean, again, I am a huge Springsteen fan. Anybody who
Do you
knows,
give it your approval, Mike? Then
I love that. And just to I had somebody ask me the other day, say, "Yeah, how big of a fan are you?" And my question back to them was, "This is how you can tell. How many shows have you been to?" And they were like, "I got you, buddy. It's like, I've been to 32. And I go, "Yeah, when you go to another 20 beyond that, let me know and we can talk."
Mike,
So,
how many shows and how many years do you figure you've Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band that you?
So first show was 1980 at the Sports Arena. Didn't really know anything. It was the River Tour. And the latest show was last year in Barcelona. And between those two, I've seen 52 different Springsteen shows across the world.
Mike. Yeah, Mike, a lot of people go to shows.
It's one a year.
When
Seems
people
like that's
are
one a
here.
year,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Or they'll go to a local show. I have some friends. I'm going to give a shout out to Dave Germain and Jack, my friend Jack. Anyway, they go to see Van Morrison all over the world. Mac Martin.
It's nothing like,
Can I do that over? I screwed that up.
Yeah, go ahead. Do it again.
For the editor.
So,
Mike,
Paul's going back.
Just as you love the boss and you've traveled the world seeing the boss, my friends Dave Germain and Jack Martin, they travel the world to see Van Morrison. And I've even met them in a couple, like up in Toronto and other places. So when you love somebody, you're willing to travel like that, like you are for the boss, I think you'll be first in line for deliver me from nowhere. Deliver us from evil, but deliver me.
Deliver us from evil. I very rarely try to get to the point where I can crash a premiere or something like that. I'm kind of over that these days, but this is one where I'm going to do everything I can to try.
I'll go with you, Mike.
All right.
I want to be your plus one.
That passion is what makes these sort of musical biopics what they are, right? It's sort of like the passion for your favorite superhero or Minecraft or anything like that. You get this sort of built-in intense personal feeling about the subject matter. So it's interesting.
Well,
You're
for
right,
the
Thaddeus.
non-Springsteen nuts, probably the in addition to Lilo and Stitch, the big footage out of the Disney presentation was they showed us a few minutes of Avatar. And
yeah.
I thought, it looked great. It looked like a continuation of what we've seen, and I feel like if you look at the summer or at the Christmas season, and we talked about it in the last part when we talked about Lionsgate, between having Housemaid and Avatar, your theaters are going to be so busy
and
over
Wicked.
the holiday. And Wicked. Well, yeah, Wicked will still be playing. I mean, it's going to be an insane Christmas season.
So, I think we should wrap it in a few minutes because we've gone almost an hour, guys.
Yes, we have.
Any more takeaways from CinemaCon or anything else before we wrap this supersized episode of Ticket to Ride with Thaddeus Bouchard? From ScreenDollars, Mike Polydoros, Paper Airplane. I can read it on his hat. And I'm Paul Dergarabedian, Senior Media Analyst for Comscore. Season 2, Episode 9B. We're almost to wrap. Any other thoughts, guys, before we wrap? CinemaCon was great.
I guess I want to come back and just say a thing about the 3 points that you made, Mike, because I think that of those 3 points, you've got windows, you've got pricing, and you've got marketing. I think the first two it's not easy to get to a resolution on, but it's easy to understand what the issues are, right? Yeah. So pricing is pricing. You charge whatever you decide to charge. Windows are windows. How many days is it going to be from which studio on which film? Marketing, I think, is the most challenging one because it's not straightforward. You have to have teams of people to explore and analyze it, and they'll all come to different conclusions. So it's interesting I feel it's interesting, and Paul, you're talking to the press all the time, how the press writes about these things or whether the press writes about all of these things.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm going to go back to all 3 of them, and it's going to be something that our industry needs to get out of its comfort zone a little bit to tackle the best way possible. And there are no easy answers on any of the 3, but they are all issues that definitely need to get addressed in some fashion so that, I again, using the buzzword, I think that the number one thing as an industry we need to do is grow the top of the funnel. And we need, that's been a shrinking top, and we need to make that the biggest possible top of the funnel. And, the competition for the entertainment dollar has never been greater. People are still consuming more entertainment than they ever had. We need to reintroduce them that, the theatrical experience is not only the best experience, but it's the best value proposition experience.
There you go. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Wow, put a nice bow on that, guys. Thaddeus and Mike. I have nothing to add, believe it or not. So that's it for this episode, supersized episode, part 2 of our CinemaCon wrap. And make sure you go and listen to part 1 as well of this episode, wherever records and tapes are sold. Thanks, guys.
Hey, have a good one, guys. Take care.
See you later, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.